A voice from the margins, Pope Francis's last plea. The whisper that echoed beyond the walls. In the heart of the Vatican, where shadows dance on ancient stone and silence carries the weight of centuries. A moment unfolded that no one could have foreseen. It was not heralded by trumpets or captured by the world's watchful eyes. It was a quiet act, intimate and raw, hidden in a modest chamber where only the most trusted cardinals gathered. The air was thick with anticipation, the rustle of robes mingling with murmurs of concern. Pope Francis, now 88, his frame weakened by time, had called this meeting amid whispers of his fading health. Was this about retirement, a transition? No one was prepared for what came next. His voice, soft yet piercing, carried a message not of policy or succession, but of the heart. It was his last plea, a vision for a church that would never forget its roots among the poor. Among those present was Joseph Mwamba, a fictional Congolese layman, once a street vendor in Kinshasa, now a voice for the marginalized, invited to this sacred space as a symbol of the forgotten. As Francis spoke, Mwamba's weathered hands clutched a rosary, his dark eyes welling with tears. Those who saw it described a man not merely moved, but transformed, a soul touched by the weight of a pope's trust. This was no ordinary moment. It was a cry from the margins, amplified by the man who had always walked among them. Francis's words were not meant to linger in that room, they were a call to ripple across oceans. To reach the slums of Africa, the favelas of Brazil, the forgotten corners of the world. Why now? Perhaps because Francis, the Jesuit pope who traded pomp for poverty, felt his mission incomplete. His plea was to keep the church a home for the broken, a beacon for those the world overlooks. And Mwamba, a black man who had known hunger and hope, seemed to embody that call. Francis's papacy had been a revolution of the heart. From the moment he stepped onto St. Peter's balcony in 2013, he signaled a new way. He chose the name Francis, honoring the saint of simplicity. He rejected gilded thrones, living instead in a modest guest house. He washed the feet of prisoners, embraced refugees, and spoke of a poor church for the poor. Now, with his strength waning, his last plea was not for himself but for the church's soul. It was a vision Mwamba, with his quiet faith and unyielding spirit, seemed destined to carry forward. Who is Joseph Mwamba, the man whose tears spoke of a shared dream? Born in a dusty Kinshasa slum, Mwamba grew up where survival was a daily prayer. His childhood was marked by the clatter of market stalls, the weight of poverty, and a faith kindled by his mother's whispered rosaries. A black man in a world that often ignored his kind. He found God not in cathedrals but in the resilience of his community. By his 30s, Mwamba had become a voice for the poor, organizing aid for street children and speaking at global forums. His eloquence born of lived experience. Mwamba's life changed when he met Francis during a papal visit to the Democratic Republic of Congo. The Pope, struck by Mwamba's humility and fire, invited him to Rome, not as a guest but as a partner in dialogue. Their bond was not one of equals but of shared purpose. Mwamba was no cleric, no scholar, but a layman whose life mirrored Francis's vision, a church that listens to the margins. In that Vatican room, as Francis shared his last plea, Mwamba's tears were not just personal. They were a bridge between the Pope's heart and the world's forgotten. The plea itself was simple yet profound. Keep the church close to the poor. Let it be their voice, their home. Francis, who had spent his papacy opening doors to the excluded, wanted this spirit to endure. Mwamba, who had walked the streets of Kinshasa with nothing but faith, understood. His presence in that room was no accident, it was a statement. A black man, once invisible to the powerful, now stood at the heart of the church, entrusted with a pope's dream. It wasn't just words, one cardinal whispered, it was a mantle placed on Joseph's shoulders. But what did this mean? Mwamba was no cardinal, no candidate for the papacy. Yet his role was perhaps greater, to be a living testament to the church's mission. His tears were not of sorrow but of awe, a man who had known the margins now called to speak for them on a global stage. Francis saw in Mwamba not just a story, but a spark, a reminder that the Church's future lies not in palaces, but in the hearts of those it serves. The Catholic Church stands at a crossroads, its ancient foundations tested by a world in flux. For centuries, it has been a fortress of faith. Its rituals and doctrines a refuge through storms of history. The Eucharist, the sacraments, the teachings, these are the pillars that have sustained billions. Yet, the world beyond Rome's walls cries for more. In Africa, Asia, and Latin America, where faith grows fastest, believers seek a church that walks with their pain, poverty, oppression, exclusion. They do not reject tradition, they ask it to meet them where they stand. Francis understood this cry. His papacy was a bridge between the eternal and the urgent, a call to root the Church in truth while reaching out in mercy. His last plea echoed this balance, urging the Church to be a voice for the voiceless, a home for the marginalized. Mwamba, with his life shaped by struggle, embodied this vision. His presence challenged the Church to look beyond its European heart to the vibrant faith of the global South, where black and brown faces carry the gospel with resilience and joy. But change stirs resistance. Within the Vatican, voices, faithful and fervent, warn that too much openness risks diluting the sacred. They fear that prioritizing the margins could blur the Church's timeless truths. These are not petty disputes, they are battles for the Church's soul. Mwamba, though not a leader in title, stands at the heart of this tension. His tears in that quiet room were not just about trust, they were about the challenge he represents, a call to rethink what it means to be Catholic in a world that no longer waits for Rome to speak first. The faithful are watching, from Kinshasa's slums to Rio's favelas. Catholics hunger for a church that sees them, not as distant flocks, but as family. They seek a faith that speaks to their wounds, that reminds them God is near. Mwamba, with his story of survival and service, seems to answer, but the path is steep. The Church must decide, will it retreat to the safety of tradition, or step boldly into the margins, where faith burns brightest? Pope Francis's last plea was never meant to fade within Vatican walls. It was a seed, sown to grow in the hearts of the poor, to blossom in parishes and streets worldwide. His vision, a church that serves, not rules, was not about his own glory, but about the future. Mwamba, a black man from the margins, carries this seed. His life, like Francis's, is a testament to faith lived in action, to a church that finds God in the faces of the forgotten. If Mwamba's voice rises, it will challenge the world. The Church faces a skeptical age, where authority is questioned, and faith must be earned. Amplifying the marginalized will require courage, to face resistance within, to speak truth to power, to redefine the Church's center. Mwamba's tears showed he feels this weight, but they also revealed his strength, a man who weeps not from weakness, but from love for those he represents. The Church's future hangs in the balance. Will it cling to old centers of power, or embrace a faith that thrives in the margins? Mwamba, from Kinshasa's streets, represents a shift, not just in voice, but in vision. His story, if heeded, could make the Church truly universal, where a black child in Congo feels seen as a pilgrim in Rome. Francis's plea lingers, a reminder that greatness lies in service. Mwamba, in his silence, may already be answering, as the faithful wait. From Nairobi to Manila, they seek not just a church, but a home. Francis's spark burns in Mwamba, a man who never sought the spotlight but now carries a pope's dream. The question is not just what the Church will say, but who it will hear. Will it rise to meet a world crying for justice? Will it carry Francis's plea into a new dawn? History is stirring, and in its movement, a quiet man from the margins stands, not for himself, but for those the world forgot.